And joining us now, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator, why don't we start there? It seems like we need some short-term solutions at the border because not a lot has changed for people.
Yeah, we have still a crisis at our border, a humanitarian crisis at our border. I've been down there and gone over and met with people that really have suffered as a result of American policy, whether it's Trump's Remain in Mexico policy that had women surviving severe sexual assault. I met with some of them unable to get in. I had to escort about 5 women into our country to try to force the hand of the Trump administration to begin the asylum process. But I'm encouraged by Joe Biden. I'm encouraged that he understands that the majority of people do not need to be in detention facilities, families, children, that in fact the Obama administration got near 99% compliance of families abiding by our court systems by allowing them to be sort of met with family guidance folks who gave them support during their time of crisis. They complied with our law. So there's a way to do this that's humane, that elevates human dignity, that protects people who are in danger.
Senator, thanks so much for being with us. I saw news earlier this morning come across the wire that our economic growth because of this bill actually could be above 6%. It could be the fastest growth since 1983. I'm sure you've heard some concerns about inflation. That's obviously great news. I mean, yay. We will take 6% growth over 1.5% growth any day of the week. Do you have any concerns about inflation, any concerns about debt down the road? Or do you think we're going to keep moving forward and avoid any inflation in the years to come?
Let me put a finer point on what you said. The OECD, that looks at overall economic growth for the planet Earth, just revised its guidelines on what planetary economic growth is going to be because of this rescue plan. They say it could more than double their estimates of American economic growth, thus affecting the economics of our entire world. That's pretty powerful. This $1.9 trillion plan is about the same size as the Republican tax cut plan, which was $1.9 trillion as well, and gave the overwhelming majority of the benefits, 65%, to the top 20% earners in America. This is a plan that American Tax Policy Institute shows that will give working Americans really the benefit. And so am I concerned with inflation? Of course. And everyone should be concerned in general with inflation. But right now, when we have an unprecedented economic and health crisis, it necessitates an unprecedented response. And this is a finely tailored bill to focus on what the hurt is. Now, I know my Republican colleagues, I'm almost stunned that they're saying, well, this is not a targeted bill. This bill is actually really mirroring the recovery plan that the CARES Act that the Republicans all voted for, from its business supports to its cash payments to its state and local aid. It really is a mirror bill putting resources out there. So this is the right resources that we need at the right time to help Americans, where we have 40% of American families with children are food insecure right now and do not know how they're going to pay for the basic needs of their families. This is a bill that's going to meet that crisis. And unlike their tax plan, it's going to actually help our overall economy grow, not just in a greater way, but also in a way that more evenly affects the entire population.
Senator Booker, it's Willie. Guys, good to see you this morning. These numbers are so big to so many people, $1.9 trillion, it can kind of feel abstract. So I thought it'd be good just for everybody watching to bring it down to the street level. We can talk about our state, what this means for Paterson or Newark or Cape May or any of the towns across New Jersey. What does it mean to a small business owner, say? What does it mean to somebody who's been out of work now for a year? All this money, where is it going, and how soon will people get their hands on it?
Well, I really appreciate that question, really. As you know, I live proudly in a great city called Newark, New Jersey. So I know families. There's a family I know running a bodega. They've got young children. They now are going to see a significant increase of their child tax credit for those kids. They're struggling to make it, but now they have an increased child tax credit that can inure, if you have 4 kids, that could be an extra $1,600 for the year for each of those children, which is a significant benefit. That actually will cut child poverty in this country in half and elevate working class people like those bodega owners. But in addition to that, that small business has been seeing a crisis. So they are now eligible for targeted small business growth. There are minority small business, which just disproportionately were left out of the previous relief acts. And now they have local financial institutions that are targeted to help them. In addition to that, they're going to get $1,400 checks to really help them. So they can see their overall income as a family go up 20%, and their struggling small business get the lifeline they need until we get out of this dark tunnel. That is pretty significant help for people on the ground across cities like Newark, Patterson, suburban towns in New Jersey as well.
Eddie Glaude is with us and has a question. Eddie.
Good morning, Senator Booker. It's always good to see you. I got a little two-part question really quickly. One is that we need to see, of course, we need to see this legislation as historic in all of its in all of its details. But of course, there's still a lot of work to be done. What are the next steps? What should we do next to really address those poor and low-wealth Americans who are still suffering out there? And the second part of the question is different. Where do you stand on narrowing the filibuster? We know we have H.R. 1. We know we have the future legislation around $15 minimum wage. What is your position around the filibuster in the Senate?
Eddie, my friend, my mentor, my brother, you know from my private conversations, I am tired of seeing in the last, really since the Reagan era, my country drive economic disparities in ways that have just not seen since the Gilded Age, and shortchange the kind of things that we know grow our country and make us more competitive. Anybody who's traveled through Europe or Asia and then comes back and compares our infrastructure. I mean, dear God, the busiest rail corridor in North America from Boston to DC runs half an hour slower than it did in the 1960s, while China's built 18,000 miles of high-speed rail. We have the highest infant mortality rates, the highest maternal mortality rates, the highest child obesity rates. We went from being the #1 country on the planet for percentage of its population graduated from college to now not even in the top 10, because we've been raising the cost of college, and all of our competitors from Germany to Canada have been lowering it. We need to get our economy back and investing in people, in infrastructure, in education, and get back to leading this planet. So this president has said that he wants to do that in another major plan that's going to invest in us, from our electrical grid, from our roads and bridges to people. We need to make the child tax credit cut permanent and start to liberate our children from the violence of poverty. And yeah, the filibuster is going to be a crossroads for our country. And this is not left or right anymore, because this incredible plan we just did is overwhelmingly popular with the majority of Republicans. As you all were talking earlier, Donald Trump has scratched the old Republican record and cracked it. And many Republicans, I'm not talking about the ones I serve with in the Senate, but Republicans across this country are beginning to say, wait a minute, too many of our children are falling behind into the trap of poverty. We should have a child allowance like all of our competitors do. Wait a minute, the cost of college is getting too great. We've saddled a generation with over $1 trillion worth of debt. Yeah, maybe we should be, to make ourselves more competitive, beginning to forgive college debt and lower that. So I think the filibuster is going to be a defining debate for our party, whether we want to start delivering real results, or are we going to have Americans continue to throw up their hands and think, oh, Washington doesn't just work, so I'm going to surrender to cynicism about activism and politics because it clearly doesn't make a difference. We need to deliver on the demands, not of Democrats, but of Americans who want to see their government function in a highly competitive world where we should not be outdone by authoritarian governments like China, who are building better than we are right now in terms of investing in their economy and getting things done.
Yeah, you know, Cory, so you and I had a conversation probably 6 months ago. It was on Instagram Live or something, and it was so wonderful. And you talked about your faith, you talked about mindfulness, you talked about all the things that you did to try to level you and to try to help you get along with your colleagues in the Senate and others who you might disagree with. And you talked about how important that was to you. And I struggle, and I've struggled for a long time to do that as well. Sometimes I don't do as well as other times. Sometimes I get really angry. I'm just wondering, though, let's take a guy like Mike Lee. I've known Mike for quite a while. I like Mike. I respect him. I've always had a good relationship with him. Heck, I've known Lindsey since 1994. I mean, I know a lot of the people that are your colleagues, and they're friends that I have known and loved. But Mike Lee, here's a good example of a guy who, a couple years ago seemed a little more rational in his political talk, but he's called H.R. 1. He's described this bill that I think most Americans will see as actually allowing more people to be involved in the democratic process, allow more people to vote, allow more people to have access without having to wait in line for hours to cast their vote. He called H.R. 1 a bill from like the gates of hell itself, written by the devil. Now, I'm just wondering, how do you sort through this when you've got a colleague, a guy that you know, a guy that I'm sure you like, a guy that you respect, but he's actually talking about a bill that would help Black Americans and Hispanic Americans and underrepresented Americans actually be able to vote, be able to get more involved in this process? How do you bridge that wide of a divide when Republicans are working overtime to actually make it harder for Americans to vote?
So it's hard to hold often competing philosophies in your mind and try to reconcile them. I'm when it comes to defending fundamental rights, from voting rights or defending against the violence of poverty, I will stand my ground. But you can never stop working to find that common ground as well, to love someone despite your differences, despite your belief in the core of your soul that they are wrong and hurting people, to never stop loving them, because that love will keep a door open to finding some ways to work together. During the long 24-hour time on the floor, Mike Lee came to the Democratic side, pulled out a chair, and sat plopped right down in the middle of a walkway to talk to me, and to talk to me about common ground that he and I share on criminal justice reform. Mike and I fervently disagree, but I am challenged every day never to stop loving him and to keeping the civility necessary. We are in a culture right now where we demonize each other. We rip each other down. We manufacture outrage when someone says something stupid, and every one of us that are having this conversation have said boneheaded things. And so love is not saccharine. It's not soft. It is the most challenging philosophy to live by. It is difficult. It is hard. It is uncompromising. And right now, this country, we every single day fuel our internet platforms. We get more people to watch our shows. Corporations get rich off of making us hate each other. And it's decimating our society. And I think if we do a better way to get to sort of rising to this call of our country, the things are going to change bigger than we think. And I'll give you the last example of that, because, a lot of people are elected in the Capitol right now that feed off of that outrage and that hate that often turns people off, that then don't participate in our politics. I think the Republican Party there's a lot of good Republicans out there that want to see change, that aren't engaged in politics. The system, as Martin Luther King's most loving letter I've read, the letter from Birmingham jail, he was firing those missiles not at the white supremacists, but about good people who do nothing. It's about time that Republicans and Democrats who have opted out because they don't like the politics in their party to lean in more, to be more activists. And then maybe you'll start seeing the Republican electeds down here start behaving differently, because they're not answering to the narrowing gap of hatred and bile, but to the widening gap of people who want to have a more beloved community and country together.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.